Sometime last week, I was having a conversation with one of my mentees, and she was like, "What are the mistakes to avoid as a project manager, and how do I avoid it?" And in this video, I would actually be sharing insights into the common mistakes in project management and how to avoid them. Stay tuned. The first is lack of understanding of the project's goals and objective. Most project managers just deep dive into projects without understanding the key goals of the project. So how do I actually ensure I avoid this mistake? Is by ensuring that you have stakeholder alignment, asking different questions towards understanding the scope of the project, the objective of the project, and what you are trying to achieve. Once you've done that, you are then able to set smart goals for your project. Define your project objective, define your project scope, and with this, you already have an idea of what it is you want to manage, the touch points to actually manage them, as opposed to just having a vague idea of what you're trying to manage. The second mistake project managers make is inadequate planning. And I feel like this happens because some of them are just eager to deliver, or they are being pressured by stakeholders to deliver this project on time. And like people say, if you fail to plan, you are planning to fail. And you not planning your project properly actually exposes you to the risk of having a failed project, running over budget, not considering different touch points or resources that you need to actually assign to your project. So how do I solve this as a project manager? So what I do is I ensure that I organize a necessary planning session with different stakeholders to actually gather all the things I need towards planning my project. Secondly, I create a detailed project plan. This serves as a guide towards managing the project. Also, you consider all your costs, budget planning, and everything. Consider everything you need to plan in your project, and don't let nobody rush you. Ensure that you've properly planned, considered your risk, right? Your risk, the cost that you need, the resource that you need. Consider different things when planning your project. Once you've done this, then you can now say you've planned properly and you're ready to execute. The third mistake is scope creep, right? And this is common to new project managers because most times they don't know how to actually handle things like that. What does scope creep mean? It basically means when new features are requested within your project or new scope is requested within your project after executing your initial project plan. And how do I handle this? I handle this by ensuring that I have a proper change management process, basically looking at new requests that comes in, the impact on my project, and then getting approval from stakeholders, right? And also, you need to also monitor those changes because guess what? It wasn't what was part of your initial plan, right? And without having a proper change management process and approval for that change, then by the time you are reviewing your project at the end, it shows that you've actually had a scope creep. And that's because what was agreed upon during the initiation phase is not what was delivered, right? So which is why it is advisable to avoid this. The next on the line is poor risk management. Most project managers, especially when they're new, they overlook this. Within your projects, you need to properly manage your risk. You need to identify the possible risks that will happen. You need to define mitigation plans, right? Or different risk management strategies to actually resolve that risk before they turn into an issue. So basically what I do is I try to identify all the risks before my project. I monitor and track them to ensure that all the mitigation plans are being executed to avoid that risk from actually becoming a reality in my project, basically. So you're supposed to do that towards ensuring that you don't have to experience inadequate risk management within your project. One other thing is you should also involve contingency plans as part of your risk management strategy. So in case where anything happens within your project, you use those contingency plans, right, towards resolving that risk, right? So towards mitigating that risk or resolving an issue that happens within your project. So it's very important to ensure that you have like a proper risk management process within your project. Another mistake to avoid is insufficient allocation of your resources. Most times, most project managers actually get confused as to how to allocate resources effectively in their project. So basically, you need to be able to know how to assign your resources. Another common mistake project managers make is not engaging your stakeholders, right? Which is like poor stakeholder communication. As a project manager, you need to ensure that your stakeholders are carried along in your project. You need to keep them posted as to every progress that you make, right? Not communicating with them will make you miss information, also make them miss certain information that are supposed to help you deliver your project. In most cases, this actually leads to like misalignment, dissatisfaction, because one stakeholder feels like it's not carried along. This last one is a major mistake that most new project managers make, and that is lack of proper monitoring of your project. Like, if you fail to monitor your projects, you are prone to different issues within your project, like missed deadlines, risk becoming issues, cost overrun, and you won't just know that your project is losing it, right? And the best way to approach this is ensuring that you set regular intervals for monitoring your project. So you could be monitoring the project plan, looking at your schedule to say, okay, fine, what are the activities that are approaching deadline, right? And what are the activities that are prone to be late, right? So what I typically do is I have a list of upcoming tasks, which I monitor to know, okay, these are the tasks that I'm supposed to execute in the next few days. And I have a list of tasks that are approaching deadline. And for tasks approaching deadline, I sit with the resource responsible for it to further validate if we're on track as regards that task. And this helps me properly monitor my project's timeline. Same applies to your costs. You're also looking at how much you've expended as it relates to how close you are to the finish line, right? You're also looking at the risk and issues to say which of the issues have been resolved and which risk is actually looking like it's going to happen in the immediate. So with this, you're able to properly ensure that your project health is on track. You also need to have a dashboard where you monitor your project KPI to be sure that everything is aligned as per your project scope. Having this as a project manager would ensure that your project never loses track. It never has any issue that would actually lead to you becoming or being tagged a bad project manager. So please guys, ensure that you monitor your projects on a regular basis. So I'll conclude this by saying, as a project manager, you need to ensure that you properly avoid these mistakes, properly define your project scope and understand the requirement of your project, properly communicate with your stakeholders, identify your risk and issues, ensure you are properly planning your project, right, and monitoring all that has to do with your project. If you can avoid these mistakes as a project manager, I would say you're on good track to actually deliver your project successfully. Stay tuned for more updates and don't forget to follow for more. I'd like to know what you think are the ways that you can actually avoid these common mistakes. Until the next time, keep managing your project like a pro.